Hi guys, so in this video we're going to talk a bit more about the fantasy world of the NI dominance, perhaps some other types too. We're going to talk more by Hegel, and you're going to see the connection I'm making here, hopefully, because it is important. We're going to try to understand the relationship between fantasy PH, unconscious fantasy, and fantasy with an F, which is the more conscious fantasy that we are more or less to various degrees aware of in our daily experience, whether it be in some ruminations that we have, in reveries and daydreams and things like that. Okay, so before we start off, don't forget that if you give me a like, this helps with the referencing, so I would really appreciate that. It doesn't cost you much, just a click. Don't forget that you can support me on Patreon too, if you would like me to continue producing this content for you, this quite cutting-edge research in terms of NI dominance in particular. It's only a few books a month or a few books a year, and it helps massively with added numbers, so please consider it. The link is below. You get access to cool perks, like exclusive videos, like deep dive 20 to 30 minutes, where I go in depth about topics selected by the Patreon members. The latest one was, what would an NI dystopia look like? So if that is of interest to you, definitely join. You can also get access to our Discord server, the Fourfold, interact with me and the other members on a daily basis. It's a lot of fun. Now, so the interesting thing about Hegel is that Hegel is universally considered, the philosopher Hegel is universally considered to be an NI dominant, and more specifically considered to be an INTJ. Now, of course, in my work on type and in my channel and my books, I am quite used to challenging particular notions regarding the type of this or that personality, well-known personality, public personality, writer, historical figure, philosopher, scientist, what have you, right? So a lot of my takes on some people's types are not mainstream, but I strongly believe in them, and I'm always ready to provide the argument for it. So for example, I believe that Kierkegaard was not INFP, but INFJ. I believe that Hitler was not an INFJ. I believe that Jordan Peterson, definitely not an INFJ. I believe that Nietzsche is not an INTJ, but an INFJ. Which is probably one that you might wrap your head around, unless you've already heard my opinion on this matter, and lots of other things like that. But in the case of Hegel, like I said, almost universally typed INTJ, I think, I have nothing to add to that. I think that he's an INTJ, and there's no point, at least I don't really see a lot of point in challenging that notion, because I agree with it. I should mention also Heidegger. For a long time on Personality Database, typed ISTJ. I made an argument for INTJ. It's now kind of, in a sense, it's the dominant view now, and I'm quite glad that it is, because I think that Heidegger is a very obvious NI dominant. But in any case, with Hegel, we have the example of an NI dominant who is known for having what he himself calls a system, a philosophical system. And yet, in my current work and in my current videos, I tend to say that it is not really a trait of NI dominance to be systematic. Systematic, for me, is much more likely to crop up in the fantasy life and in the actual life experience and life achievements of T users. TI dominance, TE dominance. Of course, with TI dominance, you tend to have more of the expression of an internal system, an internalized system that is then, in the best of cases, externalized. With TE dominance, the system in question is external to begin with, right? It uses the resources of the external world to devise systems with its own kinds of logistics and instruments and equipment and so on. But not NI dominance, and yet Hegel presents an interesting case. This is in fact something that was discussed on the Fourfold. We had a discussion around that, and I decided to sort of dig a little deeper, because I thought it would be of interest to at least some of you. In my view, Hegel, although he's seen as the quintessential systematic philosopher, you know, the system of the dialectic of absolute spirits and so on, Hegel is not. Hegel is very good at pretending, pretending that he is systematic. He is also very good at creating an aesthetic about his work that has an aura of system. But I don't think his work is particularly systematic. And the simple reason for this is, honestly, if you are to meet the criterion for a work that is systematic, it should mean that you understand the basic constituents of the theory quite straightforwardly, and that you're able to get from a particular point in the theory, like, you know, a sort of like unit point, to another one or to a combination through certain rules, right? So in a sense, nothing is left to chance, it's all system. Now, that I'm not saying that like systems in general work like this, but when it comes to a philosophical work, a system is in a sense a work where, if you like, there is at the center of it, like almost like a sort of purified essence that devises the principal variables that determine the rest of the system. It's not a system in this sense. A philosophical system is not very friendly with uncertainty. It's not very friendly with vagueness. It's not very friendly with chance, with happenstance, with luck, or anything of the kind. It's also not very friendly with the woo-woo of spirit, with things that have a kind of a wet essence to it, a thick essence to it. It likes things that are lean. It likes things that can be combined, right? In a sense, a system is also a kind of large combination matrix. And none of these are traits that you find in Hegel's system. What you find in Hegel is something that you can only take seriously as a kind of an aesthetic of a system if you see it as infused with spirituality, as infused, in fact, with more than just spirituality, but with mysticism. We know that Geist, what is translated sometimes as mind, sometimes as spirit, and it's interesting that even Geist is not properly defined. It has an etymological, this has been established. Geist in German has an etymological connection with ghost, right? So Hegel's Geist is related to ghostliness. And that's very spiritual, and that is very mystical. It's very NI. And if you don't take that seriously, you can't really see him as a systematic thinker, which is why most TI dominants and most people in general either don't understand Hegel, dismiss Hegel as a charlatan or as someone who mystifies with his writing. What I would say is that Hegel's work is very creative, but it is expressive of a fantasy of system, and in this case, fantasy with an F, because Hegel was definitely aware of what he was doing. I think that in a sense, his work is an attempt to repair something about the world by showing that the world can be saved through reintegration, and that it is part of the matrix of the world to achieve dialectically this plenitude, this reintegration through holism, plenitude, and what is eventually called the absolute spirit. So Hegel's picture ultimately is a picture of reunification, of healing of a wound, the wound of becoming, by showing that being and becoming are, not distinct. They're just like, in a sense, only in unintegrated stages of the journey of Geist, the ghost, the Holy Ghost, perhaps. There's definitely a link there as well. And it is a vision that is much more motivated in the last analysis by the desire for repair of reality, whose resistance to being encompassed as a holism, as a reconstructed womb, is threatening to the NI dominant. The fantasy of system is just a way of saying, well, Hegel creatively comes up with a faux system as just a metaphor for what his own vision of the rebirth of a complete world, a complete womb, looks like. So it is a fantasy of system, but not a system. And this fantasy of system is, of course, the expression of an unconscious fantasy of repair. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. A bit speculative, but I thought it was interesting to discuss Hegel. Don't forget that if you're interested in anti-dominance, and particularly INFJs, and you know that I have an NI book coming out hopefully next year, you're going to enjoy that a lot, especially if you're a deep thinker and you like the unconscious. But until then, my book on the INFJ called The Ecstatic Soul is available still. Put my name on the map. Definitely worth reading if you want a deep understanding of the INFJ's inner world. Ecstatic Soul is linked below. And what is also linked below, first link below in fact, is the Infinite Soul. INFJ life in modern world. How you find meaning, purpose, and value as an INFJ with the kind of mind you have, with the kind of makeup you have in a world we often see as hostile. These two books go well together, as you can see, and they're essential for a deep understanding of this beautiful type. Thank you very much. Talk to you tomorrow, guys.